Hello there. Welcome to Just the Discs. We talk about Blu-rays here. My name is Brian, and today we're talking about some Imprint Films Blu-rays. I need to remind folks at the top that these are region-free Blu-rays. If you import them, you can play them in an American US player, no problem. I just like to say that at the top. Sometimes I forget. So this is the bundle for February 2024, and it's an interesting bundle. There's a lot of different stuff happening here. We've got some big directors in the first three that I'm going to talk about, directors that are important to me, and then some others that I don't know as well, but the films seem interesting. I haven't had a chance to check all of these out, but I do like to kind of make people aware that they're available, talk about context in terms of when these films come in the filmographies of the directors in question, and just give you an idea of maybe what I think of those directors. And the first one is a big one for me in terms of a director that I like, and that's Bob Rafelson. His film Mountains of the Moon from 1990. I believe this is the worldwide Blu-ray debut of this film, which is very exciting because this movie, I still have yet to see it. I'm very excited to watch it. Was one I recall that a coworker of mine during my college years at the video store had this in his employee picks. He was also a big fan of like Gallipoli. I think that's Peter Weir, and he liked Camera Buff from Kozlowski. I remember these were movies he would talk about constantly, and for whatever reason, I just decided I wasn't going to watch them, which was kind of rude on my part. But I don't know, there's just something about somebody pushing a movie all the time that I think has always been difficult for me to accept, which is dumb, because I should just open myself up to it. And what I've found out, in part through this release and some of the features I was able to just get a glance at, is that this is Rafelson's favorite film he ever made. Now, that's something, because he was one of the big new Hollywood directors of the late 60s and early 70s, really. He continued on well past that time, but really had an interesting run, starting by getting involved with the Monkees, the band, of course, and directing their movie Head, which I think, to me, is one of the great psychedelic films of the 1960s. And there's a great, the BBS box set has all of his 70s stuff. So it has Head, it has Five Easy Pieces. He was close with Jack Nicholson, and so Nicholson, wrote Head, if I recall, or at least co-wrote it. And Nicholson taking off around this time was in Easy Rider. Easy Rider being sort of the impetus for, or one of the impetuses for, the new Hollywood switch, if you will, where studios were suddenly allowing non-Hollywood voices to be heard and allowing them to make their movies. And a lot of great movies, as we know, came out in that time. Five Easy Pieces, definitely one of them. King of Marvin Gardens, another one. Both of these are actually playing at the New Beverly in the month of April in a cool double bill. I like both Five Easy Pieces and King of Marvin Gardens. I think King of Marvin Gardens is maybe my favorite Rafelson film. It's a really interesting movie about two brothers played by Jack Nicholson and the wonderful Bruce Dern in maybe one of his best roles ever. Also stars some other folks like Scatman Carruthers, and it's a really interesting movie about the one brother who's like a radio personality, sort of. He does like late night show where he tells stories, kind of like a podcaster ultimately. And his brother is a kind of a hustler in Atlantic City, and he's trying to supposedly secured them an island that he's going to run this resort on, and it's this whole thing. Anyway, one of my favorite new Hollywood movies, and so I've been a big fan of Rafelson for a long time. I recently talked about his 96 film, I think, Blood and Wine, on the Pure Cinema podcast, my show. And so he does Head, Five Easy Pieces, King of Marvin Gardens, Stay Hungry, which is sort of a bodybuilding movie with Jeff Bridges, He does a remake of The Postman Always Rings Twice, now again with Nicholson and in this case Jessica Lange. Very sexy remake of that film. He does a movie called Black Widow, and that takes us up to 1987, and then he follows that with Mountains on the Moon. And after that, we get Man Trouble, Tales of Erotica, Blood and Wine, Poodle Springs, which I've always meant to see with James Caan, a little noir action there. But anyway, so this is where Mountains on the Moon sits in his filmography, okay? And it's the story of Captain Richard Francis Burton, played by Patrick Bergin, and Lieutenant Hanning Speck, and their expedition to find the source of the Nile River in the name of the Queen Victoria's British Empire. And the film tells the story of their meeting, their friendship, emerging amidst the hardship, and then dissolving after their journey. Again, Patrick Bergin plays Burton, Ian Glenn plays Speck. Richard E. Grant is in this film as well, Fiona Shaw. Definitely some other faces or names I recognize. But again, it's not like you'd call it Rafelson's Raiders of the Lost Ark, but it is the closest to that he probably got. Like an adventure movie is the vibe I get. And so that's really exciting for me. Again, that this is a worldwide first on Blu-ray. So let's see here. I like this quote that the imprint has on the website. The exploits of Sir Richard Francis Burton make Lawrence of Arabia look like a tourist. So there's that. This is a 1,500 copy only run, 1080p presentation. It doesn't say anything about a new scan, but the film does look good, and I don't even know if it had a really nice DVD release. So it's been one that's been not greatly represented on home video, and sadly we lost Bob Rafelson in 2022, so he will not have lived to see this release of one of, if not his favorite film that he made, which is sad. But I'm glad it's out there. I'm glad it's got this release. And Imprint has really done right by the film in terms of they've got some nice features here, which I will go through for you. As I said, Rafelson no longer with us, but there is some archival footage of him that's included as part of one of these features that I think is pretty cool. So first we have an audio commentary by Peter Tungette, and I'm very, again, excited to check that out. Then this featurette called Be Careful with Obsessions, Bob Rafelson, Henry Jaglom, and Two Paths to Capturing Reality. It's about 14 and a half minutes. And what it is basically is a 2023 interview with Henry Jaglom at a restaurant, which is by his insistence, and he even makes a point at the beginning of the interview to say, I know this is a distracting environment, but this is the way I like to do interviews. It feels real to me, and he's right, it does work. So he's recalling his memories of meeting Rafelson and them becoming involved in a project that ultimately would become Jaglom's film Tracks from 1976 with Dennis Hopper about a Vietnam vet accompanying a soldier's body on a train. And he meets lots of interesting people. If you haven't seen Jaglom films, they're a little even more experimental than some of the other new Hollywood fare, in that they, like, the closest would be like a more comedic Cassavetes, maybe, would be a description I could use. Because a lot of it does feel like improvisational, conversational things happening in front of the camera. And apparently Rafelson himself tells a story about how so that's the thing. There's a 1986 interview that I'm not sure if Jaglom is conducting or is involved with, but so we have that footage of Rafelson, and then we have this new footage of Jaglom, and they're intercut, and they're telling stories of each other and stuff. But so Rafelson tells a story about how Jaglom used to have a camera with him, like an 8mm camera or something with sound or something, that he would carry with him all the time and film everybody. And that was apparently pretty annoying. I have some good stories about that. But yeah, so they talk about their meeting and, they're working together, and how he helped Jaglom get acting work, which he had until 1967 when he says he lost The Graduate to Dustin Hoffman. that would have been a whole different movie with Jaglom in there for sure. But then he decided to focus on filmmaking, so it's kind of a win in that way, because I do think his films are interesting. So anyway, 14 and a half minutes, and neat to see the two interviews intercut and get to hear Rafelson talking. He's a very intelligent guy, big personality, but also kind of soft-spoken. I've heard comparisons like of him thinking himself as kind of like a John Huston type, and you can kind of feel that a little bit in these interview bits. So anyway, that's one featurette, 14 and a half minutes. Then we have A Mountainous Soul, and that's Peter Rafelson remembers his legendary father. This is his music producer's son talking all about his dad for almost 20 minutes. A neat tribute. Definitely neat to see his son and some, old photos and things mixed in there. It's an interesting interview. I dig that. An Irishman in Africa. This is Patrick Bergin becomes explorer Richard Burton, and this is about 8.5 minutes. It's a Zoom interview with Bergin. These are new featurettes. These are 2023, commissioned things. So he goes through his recollections of casting and the production and Rafelson, and it's cool. It's neat to see him. And I like the way this is done, honestly. Like, I like Zoom in. I don't mind Zoom interviews at all anymore in terms of features. I know it's not the ideal thing, but I feel like if it's between getting somebody on Zoom or not getting them at all, it's like that's a no-brainer to me. But the way that it's done is there's sometimes a little window of the Zoom on screen with the actor playing a scene, the silent footage playing behind it. I like that better than just using footage. Sometimes it works better. I don't know why, but so that's a cool interview. And then we have And the Revolution Followed Him. Author-journalist Josh Karp remembers Bob Rafelson. And Karp, this is almost 20 minutes as well. Karp was a writer for, among other things, Esquire magazine. And he did a piece on Rafelson in 2019 called Bob Rafelson Emerges to Reflect on His Feud and Brawl-Filled Career. And so this guy has some great stories about Rafelson. And he says that Bob said that he did the interview because of Mountains of the Moon. And he wanted, to talk about that movie in particular, or at least make sure that was brought up, because apparently this is where you find out it was his favorite movie he ever did, and that he felt that it didn't get a great release and promotion when it came out. So it's one of those sort of like heartbreaking things for a director. But Karp has some good stories that Rafelson told him about his many adventures, and this guy was very much an adventurer, in his way, and did fight with studio heads and just was a big personality, really interesting guy. I think Karp sums him up really well and says that he's a new Hollywood version of an old Hollywood swashbuckler director. So like a Michael Curtiz or something, I guess. I don't know. But I dig that idea. So then there's Making of the Moon featurette from 1990. That's a 5-minute studio-produced archival featurette with interviews with Rafelson, Patrick Bergin, Fiona Shaw, Ian Glenn, and producer Daniel Melnick. And, it's cool because you have all the major players there, and they're doing the interview at the time of production. It's a fluffy bit, but it's nice to have it, regardless. But I'm very excited that this is available on Blu-ray. This is a very cool thing. Studio Canal handled the scan, and I haven't seen too many Studio Canal transfers that I was disappointed in. We'll put it like that. Okay. So another director I'm a big fan of is Peter Yates. And I don't know if this is a debut or not, but this one's not too readily available on Blu-ray as far as I know. Maybe there's a Sony or is this a Columbia? Who put this one out? Yeah, it's Columbia. Like bare bones DVD. I mean, I guess this one's kind of bare bones too. It doesn't even have a commentary, but still, I don't know about this one's availability. But it's not hugely available on Blu-ray regardless. But this one is from Peter Yates, who he is the director who is probably most remembered for things like Bullet. He makes Bullet in 1968 with Steve McQueen. It's a big hit, and it blows up in a big way. He had done films before that, one of which I love is called Robbery from 1967, which has got an incredible car chase, a really great British crime film. He does Murphy's War with Peter O'Toole in 1971. That's great. The Hot Rock with George Segal and Robert Redford in 72. And then Friends of Eddie Coyle and Mother Jugs and Speed and The Deep with Nick Nolte. I love Breaking Away from 79. Just a great coming-of-age movie all about a kid who's obsessed with bicycling and the Italian biking team, played by Dennis Christopher, but the cast is like Dennis Quaid, Daniel Stern, Jackie Earle Haley, Barbara Barry, Paul Dooley. Fantastic movie. I adore it. And like I said, it's probably my favorite Peter Yates film. So that's 79. He does Eyewitness in 81 with Sigourney Weaver and the recently late William Hurt. That's an interesting movie. Then he does Krull. I'm just going through this because I think his variety of output is pretty incredible. Krull from 83, for my mind, one of the great 80s fantasy films, with one of the great 80s fantasy weapons, the glaive. So he does that in 83, and then in 83 also, he puts out The Dresser. Now, this movie is pretty lesser known, despite having a neat cast. It stars Albert Finney as he goes by Sir. It's an actor in a touring Shakespearean theater company, and a backstage hand, the dresser. That's played by Tom Courtenay, who I know from like Billy Liar and some other British films. A really solid actor. So he is his dresser. He's kind of his manservant, more or less. He's devoted to the brilliant but tyrannical head of the company. He struggles to support the deteriorating star as the company struggles to carry on during the London Blitz. This is World War II era stuff. The pathos of his backstage efforts rival the pathos in the story of Lear and the Fool that is being presented on stage as the situation comes to a crisis. So it's got sort of a parallel story thing happening. But Albert Finney's, I just, glanced at this one, and Albert Finney's pretty great as a larger-than-life, like, way over-the-top, overly dramatic actor who's starting to lose his mind and who really needs to be handled, if you will. He needs a handler, and Tom Courtenay is that. There's a public meltdown he's having. Tom Courtenay has to come and save him, and it seems like a really interesting dynamic. It also has Edward Fox, Xena Walker, Eileen Atkins, Michael Gough, and a host of other British actors. So I'm intrigued by this one, definitely. This idea of the touring Shakespeare company and how it's the movie itself is kind of a drama and a comedy, more drama than comedy, but there is comedic moments, especially in the ridiculous performance from Albert Finney. So yeah, this is a cool one. Again, no features on this, but still neat to have another one from Peter Yates in the Imprint collection. Then we have Ingmar Bergman, in that we have this movie called Face to Face. And this one is from 1976, and this is also a Blu-ray first, worldwide first. So Bergman, fascinating filmmaker, one that it took me a while to kind of get into when I was getting into movies hardcore, when I was getting into like Criterion stuff, And I loved his collaborations between Liv Ullmann and Erland Josephson. I think I had first heard about Erland Josephson and Liv Ullmann in Scenes from a Marriage, which was supposedly a big influence on Andy Hall and Woody Allen. And you can definitely see that. There's both it was made for television, but it was cut down for a movie. Fascinating, devastating portrait of a marriage. Scenes from a Marriage, I think obviously an influence on Noah Baumbach's Marriage Story as well, in terms of what, the general idea. But anyway, Bergman, tons of classics, Autumn Sonata, Cries and Whispers, Hour of the Wolf, Fanny and Alexander. These are just the ones that star Erland Josephson. But Bergman is just one of those incredible filmmakers that really, he just was able to find a way to make really groundbreaking, interesting films. Obviously, The Seventh Seal, Persona, Wild Strawberries, another big influence on Woody Allen. Winter Light, I mean, he did a ton of great stuff. Through a Glass Darkly, The Virgin Spring, which is obviously the jumping off point for Last House on the Left. Tons of great stuff from Bergman. So this is one that I didn't really know. So it's from 1976, and Liv Ullmann, who is just a fantastic actor. I love her. She plays Jenny Isaacson, and she's a psychiatrist whose temporary position at a mental hospital offers only modest responsibilities. With her husband out of the country for a seminar and her daughter at a camp, Jenny moves in with her grandparents, expecting a relaxing few months, but it isn't long before unpleasant memories of her childhood, the sudden appearances of strange apparitions, and a near rape push this otherwise stable woman to the very edge of sanity. So it's a woman on the edge, woman on the verge of a nervous breakdown, woman under the influence. It feels like that of a piece with that kind of movie. Again, I haven't seen it yet, but that's the vibe I get. And because I think Liv Ullmann is so good, I'm fascinated to check this one out. So, yeah, this is pretty cool. And like I said, a first on Blu-ray. And it has a new audio commentary by film writer and historian Michael Brook. And it also has The Silence, Face to Face, and Feminine Rage, a video essay by film critic Kat Ellinger, included here as well. So it's original Swedish and dubbed English languages, so you have optional English subtitles for the Swedish version. So you can watch it dubbed if you like, which is always a nice option for those that don't want to read subtitles, which I understand, but these films I often do watch in their original language. But yeah, 2 hours and 15 minutes, and a Bergman that to me is really not known, so that's exciting. So that's Bob Rafelson, Peter Yates, and Bergman in this group. That's a pretty great group, ultimately. But yeah, so that is Face to Face. And then next we have, this is one I've heard about, but I have not seen. It's called I'm Not Scared. And it is from 2003. This is also a Blu-ray premiere, and it's about a 9-year-old girl who discovers, while playing outside one day, 9-year-old Michelle discovers Filippo, who is chained to the ground at the bottom of a hole. And based on the 2001 novel by Nicole Amaniti, I'm Not Scared was nominated for the Golden Berlin Bear and the 2003 Berlin International Film Festival. And so I've heard it's a really interesting sort of horror movie from this period. It's, I believe, Italian language with English subtitles. But yeah, it sounds like a fascinating horror film to me, and I remember it being a big deal at the time, when Guillermo was breaking out with his first horror movie. I feel like it was right around that time that this one was coming out too, and so there was an interest in foreign horror that I found really intriguing. And so yeah, I just remember it registering for a second and then dissipating for me ultimately. And so I'm excited that this has sort of brought it back into my mind, ultimately, as a movie that I remembered being one that was getting some great attention at the time, and then just went away. So yeah, this is gonna be one I'm gonna have to check out, and it's got some features here that actually there's quite a few features. They're bringing in features from other discs here. I don't know all the sources, but you have an audio commentary by the director Gabriel Salvatores. So it's great that we have that. I'm curious if that's a subtitled commentary that I did not get a chance to look at. It says 1080p high definition presentation of the original Italian cut. So yeah, I wonder how they do the commentary. But Fields of Gold, an interview with the writer Nicole Amaniti. That's about 16 and a half minutes. That's Italian subtitled interview. talking about the story, and an archival interview with the director. That's about 24 minutes. Again, Italian with English subtitles. The film, the story, the music, a documentary, and this includes interviews with the director, writer, producer, I think the composer as well, all Italian and English subtitles. That's about a 34-minute documentary. And then there's a behind-the-scenes featurette that's about 12 minutes long that is literally behind-the-scenes footage of the movie being shot and stuff like that. So cool to have, again, this variety of drama and adventure and horror. I like what Imprint does in terms of the breadth of stuff that they're putting out. So that's I'm Not Scared. And then we have A Man in Love. And this film is from 1987. It is directed by Diane Curris. An American film star and an unknown British actress meet on set in Rome. She's angry when she refuses to speak to her journalist father, but later they have a passionate relationship. So it stars Peter Coyote and Greta Scacchi and Jamie Lee Curtis and Claudia Cardinale and Peter Riegert, John Barry. Yeah, it's got a really cool cast, actually. And this one, I'm intrigued more by the cast even than the story. I like Peter Coyote quite a bit. If you haven't seen Heartbreakers from the good folks at Fun City Editions, that's a great showcase for a not necessarily likable Peter Coyote character, one of his better performances. But this one sounds fascinating. And it includes an audio commentary by film critic Alexandra Heller-Nicholas, who is among my favorite folks to do commentaries. Great writer in her own right. Many film books to check out that I do recommend you seek out from her. But yeah, so the fact that she's doing a commentary and the cast is what it is, I'm intrigued. This is a movie I have seen the cover of, like this cover of, you know, him kissing her neck. Like I know I've seen that before in my life on the video store shelves. It's an English language film. And yeah, I definitely remember this, but I'd never seen it. So A Man in Love. And then lastly, we have Children of Heaven from 1997. And this one is directed by Majid Majidi. And it's Zori's shoes are gone. Her older brother Ali lost them. They are poor. There are no shoes for Zori until they come up with an idea. They will share one pair of shoes, Ali's. School awaits. So it sounds like a very interesting, you know, story with children at the center. And another one that I maybe have heard of, but didn't fully register with me when I saw the title. So I'm very curious about this one as well. Pretty well rated on Letterboxd, so it looks like it's a pretty good movie. No features on this one, unfortunately. But maybe this one might also be a debut. I don't know about that, actually. This is Persian language, optional English subtitles for this. So that's Children of Heaven from 1997. So that'll do it for this bundle from the good folks at Imprint Films. Check them out over at ViaVision's website, or just search Imprint Films online. You can get their stuff from various sources, including sometimes Diabolic DVD, Orbit DVD, import CDs, and Amazon will have them. They will be a little bit more expensive at Amazon. You can look on eBay if you're not willing to import, but you can always go to the ViaVision website and order these bundles straight up from them. Anyway, thank you so much for listening, and I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.